This episode of WDW Today is being sponsored by TouringPlans.com. And hey, we all know TouringPlans.com is a great resource for finding information about crowds and navigating them at Walt Disney World, right? Well, did you know that TouringPlans.com now features great tools to help you plan your trip to Disneyland? That's right. They just rolled out a lot of features to Disneyland. In fact, this has been something they've been working on for over 10 years. So you can get a crowd calendar for Disneyland. You can get the Lines app for Disneyland, touring plans, just like Walt Disney World, but Disneyland. So if you've got a trip planned for Disneyland, or maybe you live in the area, regardless of what it is, you can get the same quality advice and information that you've been depending on touringplans.com for Walt Disney World for Disneyland this time. So check them out at www.touringplans.com.
Bringing the world to your world, this is Walt Disney World Today. Here are Mike Scopa, Len Testa, Mike Newell, and your host, Matt Hochberg.
It's Monday, January 31st, 2011, and this is episode 832 of WDW Today. I'm Matt Hochberg of StudioCentral.com. Joining me on today's show is Mike Newell of Mouse World Radio. And Mike, I think you're finally back from your second cruise in 2 weeks now.
Yes, Spalding.
Okay, Pookie.
Okay, Pookie.
Also joining us on today's show is Mike Scopa, a senior writer and blogger for alleears.net. Welcome, Mike.
Mr. Morrow, could you spare a few minutes to explain mission control to our passengers?
Mission to Mars.
The same building as the last one.
Was that
good?
It's the same building as the last one.
Yeah, pretty close. Isn't that amazing, huh?
Yeah, I like it.
Also joining us on today's show is Fred Hazelton, the master statistician for touringplans.com. And also, might I add, an occasional guest blogger for StudioCentral.com.
Oh.
That's right.
Well,
and don't forget, Matt, there's no gambling at Bushwood, and I never slice.
Okay, Pookie.
On today's show, we're talking about those lesser holidays, the holidays that are not as obvious in terms of crowds, because, we all know, okay, Christmas, very busy at Walt Disney World. New Year's Eve, very busy. Thanksgiving, very busy, right? But there's other holidays in the calendar year, and a lot of times people have a little more questions about them because they think, is this going to be a really bad time to go? So we thought we would go through these holidays that are the other holidays in the calendar and kind of go through some of them. Some are federal holidays, some are religious holidays, some are international holidays, and kind of figure out, now that we have Fred here who does nothing but study crowd trends, what these holidays mean if you're going to Walt Disney World, and about also if you're planning a trip there, how you could possibly plan it for yourself. So let's start with logically the beginning of the calendar year, and the first one was actually just a couple weeks ago. Is Martin Luther King Day in the United States, which was on January 17th in 2011. But Fred, let's start first. How does Martin Luther King weekend affect crowds?
Well, there's kind of we look at holidays in kind of different groups, and you've got sort of this whole set of Monday holidays like Martin Luther King Jr. Day that you kind of have to look at where the holiday falls in the rest of the calendar. And for Martin Luther King Day, we're talking about a time of year that is normally pretty quiet, be it January. So in that case, we're talking about taking what really is a low time of the year, like 3s and 4s and 5s on their calendar, and it bumps it up about 50%, something up to more like a 5, 6, 7, or maybe even an 8 on the busiest time. So you kind of have to look at where it falls and the days around it, and it's think of it bumping up just a little bit.
Yeah, I know that. I remember Martin Luther King weekend, I think, has gotten more popular in the past few years. I remember a couple years ago, I was in the studios for Martin Luther King weekend, and I remember the crowds were really much more elevated than I ever remembered them being for Martin Luther King weekend. And, Mike Scopa, we were talking before the show started. I think this about these holidays. I think, Martin Luther King weekend is one of those holidays I think a lot of people do make the 4-day weekend out of, right?
Well, one of the things that I've often thought is that, if you have that Monday off and that there's a possibility that you won't have those high crowds that you would normally see on the much more popular 3-day weekend, holiday weekends, might be worth taking that Friday off, flying down on a Thursday night, and then you have a full 3 days to really get some touring done. Yeah.
Okay, let's go to next holiday is Memorial Day, and this one I think, Fred, a lot of people assume it's actually worse than it is.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, it's you're past the Easter season and you're getting into May, but you're not quite into the summer season yet, and people think it's going to be jam packed, and sometimes it can be. The interesting thing that we see is that it's actually the day after Memorial Day that we've historically seen higher crowds. I don't know if people will do what Mike said and take off the Friday and then come and then stay to sometime during the day on the Memorial Day itself and then fly home. But it's actually interesting that we see the opposite. People actually are extending that by a couple of days and making the day after Memorial Day, the Tuesday, where park hours are a little bit shortened because it's not the actual holiday, that the wait times in the park can actually go up a little bit higher on the Tuesday than they were on the Monday, which is kind of surprising.
Right. Memorial Day I've always found is I think you hit the nail on the head there, Fred, with your analysis of what Memorial Day crowds are like. I mean, Memorial Day is not bad. It's not like about a week or two later, once you get into June, I mean, you're going to see really much bigger crowds coming in there because now kids have off from school, especially in the South. They're all gone, but they're all done by May anyway. But the North starts to get off from school, and it really gets much more busy after that. But Memorial Day weekend's not terrible. It's good weather. It's gonna be hot, but not like summer hot yet necessarily. I remember last Memorial Day was actually kind of nice out in Walt Disney World. So it's not a bad time of year. It's just it's gonna be elevated crowds from like the week before. But that being said, it's still not a bad time.
I'll tell you what. I mean, when you're looking at a spring vacation, if you could in any way take Memorial Day rather than Easter, the advantage is astronomical. I mean, Easter crowds are talking about guaranteed maximum capacity type crowds, and if you can just put off your vacation another 4 weeks and wait till Memorial Day, and maybe like Mike said, take the Friday, take the Tuesday, you're going to experience much lower crowds.
Noel, haven't you been to Walt Disney World for Memorial Day before?
Yeah, I think I was down there for was it Star Wars weekend? I think turned out to be.
I think you were there for one time, right?
Yeah, it turned out to be Memorial Day weekend. Yeah.
What did you think, Mike, of Memorial Day weekend crowds?
I'm more of a fan of Labor Day weekend crowds, only because the South goes back to school earlier.
That was a perfect segue, Mike. Why don't we talk about Labor Day crowds? Tell us a little bit about your thoughts there.
Oh, like I was saying, I think Labor Day crowds are a little easier because the South goes back to school earlier than the North does anyway. So it can get, the only problem with Labor Day weekend is you're dealing with more intense weather than you are for Memorial Day.
That's right.
It's more, it's deep into hurricane season. It's a lot more humid and muggy. So it's a different aspect. When you're married to a teacher or you have kids, you have to go by the school calendar, or you pull them out. But teachers don't usually get pulled out of school. So I have no choice but to go when school's out. So unfortunately,
I think Labor Day is one of the best holidays to go because a lot of people assume it's Labor Day. It's going to be crowded down there just like any other day, any other holiday.
That's
but really,
true, too.
I think Mike is totally right about that. A lot of people don't take it off because school just started. I mean, think about it. You don't really pull your kids out like the second week of school. Like, okay, we'll take them out to go down there for a vacation. Usually, you're going to wait till at least sometime in October,
right?
When kids start getting a fall break or something like that, where you're going to get time off. So September, Labor Day is a great holiday to go visit. Fred, what do the crowds look like on Labor Day?
Labor Day is the single lowest crowd for any national holiday.
Wow.
It's the best one by far. And the good thing about Labor Day is that if you can extend by one day and wait till the Tuesday, like the 3 days after Labor Day, some of the lowest crowds you're ever going to experience, like really, really, really low crowds. I think for that exact reason, who takes off the first week of school?
Right.
Very few people do. So yeah, I was there actually not 2010, but in 2009, I was there for Labor Day, and I was gasping at how low the wait times were on Labor Day and the day after.
Hey, one we missed actually earlier in the year was Canadian Independence Day, or Canada, and that's July 1st, right, Fred?
That's right. We also call it Canada Day.
Canada Day.
Canada Day. Obviously you're just a couple days before before Independence Day here in the United States, so it's going to be kind of influenced still by Independence Day. But what does Canada Day have any effect on crowds?
Not really. I mean, I'd like to say that we're slowly taking over the world, and yes, it does. But in terms of what we've seen now, but you're talking about fairly high summer crowds anyway. So the large number of people that come down that have that holiday is not that much more than Americans in general that have that week off or take that week for vacation. So the impact of Canada Day is pretty minimal.
Okay. Next one is Columbus Day, and this one's a weird holiday because when I was a kid, everyone got off for Columbus Day, and now nobody gets off for Columbus Day. I think bankers get off for Columbus Day. I think it's still a federal holiday.
I gotta think that that's going to be a high one. I know in the past I've been down there on Columbus Day weekend, but it was during a golf tournament that they were hosting and during a big race. So unless the race and the golf tournament falls on a different weekend, I would gather that would be a relatively high weekend.
What do you think, Fred?
Yeah, it's one of those ones that you have to watch out for because like you said, Mike, it can be combined with other things.
Yeah.
And it can often be combined with Canadian Thanksgiving, which is a big holiday up here. And a lot of Canadians will take that time to go down. And in that case, Matt, it actually can have an impact.
So you think Canadian Thanksgiving is a bigger holiday for travel to Walt Disney World for Canadians than Canada Day?
I would say so. Well, I would certainly say that it has a bigger impact on the crowds because you're talking about Canadians going down at a time when it's normally not that crowded, and it's bumping wait times up into the sort of 7, 8, or even 9 level. When the days around that would be more like 5 or 6 at the most. So yeah, it can have an effect. But also, like there are some years when things don't align that way, when our Thanksgiving is a little bit later or it's the week after Columbus Day, and those events that Scopa was talking about don't fall on the same weekends. So in those years, it can actually be not too bad, 5 or 6.
So that's not a consistent thing every year then?
No, it seems to depend every year.
Okay, so it's definitely something when you're looking at the calendar, you say, oh, there's Columbus Day, but also I guess it makes sense to, if you're looking at October, to look at the at the Canadian holidays as well to kind of see if they're, because if you line up Columbus Day and Canadian Thanksgiving, you might have kind of a, pardon the cliched term, a perfect storm of holidays coming together, and that could lead to higher crowds.
Yeah, exactly.
Last holiday I have on my list here is Veterans Day in the United States, which is November 11th. What kind of effect does that have on crowds, Fred?
Very, very little. It is. It's a holiday for us for us in Canada as well, and it's actually a national holiday. So banks, governments, that kind of thing have it off. But again, you're talking about a time of year that isn't particularly crowded. It has less of an impact than Columbus Day or maybe even Labor Day as well. It actually isn't a bad time to go. The interesting thing about these Monday holidays is that the crowds around these holidays are very much affected by the economy. I think what you find is that in years where the economy is doing poorly, that the number of people that take these shorter trips and extend these weekends is a lot smaller. People tend to prefer to sort of save up their money and maybe make a 1 week trip every 2 years rather than doing these doing more smaller trips.
Right.
So that's one area where we see the economy has an interesting effect. It could actually lessen the crowds on these Monday holidays. Something also to keep in mind.
So now let me ask you this, Scopa, to round us out here. We talked earlier about Martin Luther King weekend and making that a 4-day holiday. Which of these holidays do you think are more conducive or more likely for people to make it into these 4-day holidays than others?
It's going to depend upon the family profile. If you do not have children in school and you are not a school teacher, Labor Day would be the weekend. However, if you do have children, if you have that kind of a dynamic working in your situation, then I would say probably, oh, wow. There's so many variables. Like we just talked about the Columbus Day thing. I'm guessing maybe Memorial Day then, just because it's one that, a lot of people tend to stay away from. So I'd say that one would be the nod if I had children. Labor Day weekend would be the one if I didn't have children.
Makes sense.
I would totally agree with that, Mike. Also because Memorial Day, you're talking about more extended hours, better weather, just a overall general experience.
It's almost like summer hours.
Exactly. If you go, Labor Day or Columbus Day, you could be competing with shortened park hours for things like the Halloween parties and stuff like that. So, yeah, I would totally agree with that.
Cool. Well, that's going to do it for us today. Don't forget that this episode of WDW Today has been sponsored by touringplans.com. And if you're looking to take one of those smaller holidays out there to go, you say, I've been to Walt Disney World so many times, let's go to Disneyland. And you know what? You may not know much about Disneyland as you do about Walt Disney World, but the great news is touringplans.com has all the tools to make you look like a Disneyland expert because you're going to be able to have access to the Crowd Calendar, Lines app, and of course touring plans. And you can subscribe to all that for just $6.95 a year to access everything that Disneyland has to offer from touringplans.com. Check them out online right now at touringplans.com. If you want to find our older episodes, read our show notes, or send us your comments, you can visit us online at wdwtoday.com. For Len Testa, Mike Scopa, Mike Newell, and Fred Hazelton, I'm Matt Hochberg. We'll see you on the next show.
Stupid Judy, stupid energy.
This has been a production of Mouse World Radio.